have been, and I probably will be for some time, deeply troubled as I worship with you here this morning. Some of you were with us the other night when we went to St. Paul's AME Church to pray with the people there. And I'm tired. And I told them that. I'm so tired. I stood before my last congregation at Central Lutheran Church in Yakima, Washington, and I had to give a message after the Fort Hood massacre. And then I rose again, and I had to give a sermon after 26 students and teachers were shot at Sandy Hook. And earlier this year, I stood in the same place, following the murders at the Charlie Hebdo magazine offices. And I'm here again, in the exact same place, after 9 people, 2 of whom were ELCA pastor-trained pastors. They went to ELCA seminaries, and it turns out that the shooter was a member of an ELCA congregation. I'm tired of standing here. I'm tired of trying to make sense of evil and violence that rips people and families and communities apart. I wonder sometimes, if part of the problem is that I'm still standing here. What if part of the problem is that I'm remaining where I am? I wring my hands, I pray, I preach nonviolence, and yet I'm standing still. As I read the Gospels, I'm struck by how little time Jesus spends standing still. This morning we hear Jesus has been teaching to the crowds in this area, but it seems like it's time to move on. Where does Jesus want to go? Where does Jesus want to go this morning? Across the lake, yeah. And it's the classic joke is why did the disciples cross the lake? Because Jesus told us to. Yeah. Anyway, so they want to get to the other side of the Sea of Galilee. But now for a harder question, why does Jesus want them to move on? Why must they move on? Anybody have any ideas about that? It's a tougher question because Jesus doesn't really tell us directly why he does what he does. I wonder if it has something to do with who and what is on the other side of the lake. All right? So far, as you read Mark's Gospel, all of Jesus' ministry, all of his preaching, his teaching, and healing has taken place on the Jewish side of the Sea of Galilee. On the other side of the lake are Gentile towns. Jesus hasn't been there yet. Pagans, people who good religious people weren't supposed to hang out with, weren't supposed to touch or talk or interact with. And yet Jesus tells his disciples, both then and now, that they and we have to go across the lake. Disciples of Jesus can't stay where they are. We cannot remain where we are, doing what we always do. Jesus has come to this earth to move us from where we are. So I ask you, why can't we just keep doing what we've always done? Why can't I just stand up here and preach and teach and say, violence is bad? What if it's because if we only do what we've always done, how we've always done it, the same things will keep on happening? If Jesus and the disciples only preach and teach in Jewish areas and cities, who will be the only people who hear the gospel? Who will be the only people who hear the unconditional love and forgiveness of God? Only the Jews. If Jesus and his disciples only heal and care for their family and their friends and fellow Israelites, will God's love ever expand past one people, past one race, past one nationality? Jesus has come to earth to love and forgive and heal and save the entire world. So the disciples must move. They have to go to the other side of the lake. They can't stay where they are. So I'm led back to where we started. What can I expect to happen if I keep standing here mourning the victims of violence? What will happen if I preach about how violence is contrary to the will of God? What will be the result of our prayers and tears if we stay where we are? Is Christ calling for me to move? Is Christ calling for you to move? Is Christ calling for us to cross over to the other side? And what might this look like for me and you? What if our foundational belief, and I believe it is a foundational belief, that violence is necessary, that violence on some level is efficient. What if that is simply wrong? Think about it. I mean, somebody attacks us, what do? We bomb. Somebody hits us, we hit them back. Person murders 9 people, and we seek the death penalty. What if we can't kill our way to peace? Has it worked? Has it ever worked? There have been wars and murders and atrocities since the beginning of time. Cain and Abel, David and Uriah, Assyria, Babylon, Rome, Hitler, Rwanda, ISIS, Columbine, Sandy Hook, and now Emmanuel, God with us, African Methodist Episcopal Church. Does violence really prevent or protect us from violence? We believe that Jesus Christ came to this earth to reveal what God is truly like. And what did he teach? What did he show us? He said, if someone strikes you on one cheek, offer them the other cheek. Do not resist evil with evil, but with good. He says, those who live by the sword will die by the sword. Was Jesus and is Jesus seeking to move us from violence towards the way of peace? Can we stay where we are? Can we stay how we are? And I'm left wondering, a lot of people say, well, that's nice, Jesus, that nonviolence thing, but let's just focus in on the gay stuff. That's a lot easier. That's a lot easier. Let's focus in on the prayer and school stuff. That's a lot easier. Let's not look at about violence. He can't really mean that we can't kill our enemies, right? And yet, I'm left wondering why God would teach us. Why God would tell us something that won't work, that isn't possible or isn't realistic. And I'm drawn back into our gospel story. What happens when Jesus and the disciples try to move to the other side? When they try to cross over and minister to people who they aren't supposed to, who aren't like them? What happens? A storm, a terrible storm, a life-threatening storm. These are at least 4 of the guys are fishermen, so when they say we're dying, they're probably right. And then what I love too is, so they have all this chaos going on, and then Jesus stills the storm, and it says it was a dead calm. If you're in a sailing boat and it's a dead calm, where are you going? Nowhere. So then these guys, after being terrified, after bailing out their boat, they have to put their backs into it and row. And sweat. Going with Jesus is difficult. Going with Jesus is dangerous and costly. The way of Christ will not make our lives easier. The way of the cross, the way of peace and sacrifice will not make our lives safe. And yet, I wonder, will you, will we have the courage and faith to move, to go, to follow the path of Jesus, the path of peace, the path of life? What will it look like for us to oppose the forces of evil and violence in our world, in our daily lives? This is going to be hard. Violence is easy. Violence is simple. Violence is expected. Peace requires creativity. Peace requires complexity and the unexpected. I want to tell you a story about a guy. We had the honor of him speaking at our church, the last church I was at, and he also spoke at the National Youth Gathering. His name's Shane Claiborne. He operates out of Philadelphia. He is sort of a modern-day monk. It's the best way I can describe it. But he lives in with the neighborhood kids, and he's this tall, gangly white kid, and he's in the mainly African-American area of Philadelphia. And he was hanging out with a black kid. And evidently this kid had irked some gang members. And so this gang of kind of teenagers are chasing after Shane and this boy. And Shane's first idea was to run. And they ran for a long time, and they finally got to a point where they couldn't run anymore. And Shane turns to them at that point and stood in front of the boy and said, in the power of the name of Jesus Christ, I command you to leave us alone. And they left. And somebody said, Shane, what if that hadn't worked? What would you have done? Would you have just let him beat you up? And he said, yeah. He said, here's what I would have done, though. He said, I would have taken off all my clothes. He said, I would have stripped down naked and said, if you're going to beat me and kill me, you guys are going to be known as the people who beat and killed a naked man. He said, I don't know if it would have worked, but it's creative, right? It's different. It's outside of the box. And that's what Jesus' whole message was. It wasn't about do this and it will work. Do this and it might change people's minds. It might change the world. So I wonder, with us, how can we get creative? How can we think outside of the box? This week, I wonder when one of the greatest things is how often during our week do we get cut down or insulted, either in person or on social media, and our instant response is to come back with a greater comeback, or insult or put down. And I wonder if we could just respond with a blessing instead. God be with you. Could our church, I wonder, when somebody gets shot in the street down in the East End, could our church gather that evening at that spot and pray and sing and let people know that the darkness will not overcome the light? Could we have the opportunity to start a leadership program for our young people in 7th and 8th grade this year? This just came up this week, and it's going to be starting in mid-September, and I'm going to need help. Would we be willing to work with black and white kids and rich and poor kids so maybe we won't see these problems through another generation? What are your ideas? How are you creatively thinking about nonviolence and Jesus' path to peace and life? Where can we practice the peace of Christ in our daily lives? I invite us all to go in peace, to love and serve the people that are cruel, the people that are hurtful, the people who don't deserve it.